On my screen right now is a $4.6 million month from one of our clients that we managed. This did not happen because we ran TikTok shops. This didn't happen because we tested some random new trend. This happened with a Google ad strategy that we use across a portfolio of clients that is robust. It takes a lot of work, but I'm going to show you exactly how we did it. Before we get into that, let's break down some of these key metrics that happened in the month of November for this client in particular. So this client drove $4.6 million in sales, 700,000 total online store sessions, which is up 100% versus the previous month. Their conversion rate was 3%. If you don't know, conversion rate is really high at 3%, especially when we're dealing with average order values of $174. 25,000 orders, which is up 144% compared to the previous month. And this actually being down because what this tells us here, if we only drove 23% of our purchases from returning customers, that means 77% of all the purchases of this $4.6 million that we have here were driven from completely new acquisition, which is why we're going to dive very deep into the Google Ads account to figure out exactly how 77% of this revenue came completely fresh. First things first, let's set us up for last month. Once we're in here, the first thing we're going to notice, we're going to sort by cost. And if we scroll down to the bottom here, I'll give you some of our core metrics that happened. The whole account spent $236,000 in total cost during the month of November, and we drove over $1 million from that. So that happened at a 4.47 return on ad spend. Search was the most effective because of branded search, which I'm going to get into. That drove a 12.7 ROAS. Video drove a 2x ROAS, a 2.11, but we use that for awareness mostly. Here's what I really want to focus on. We spent $192,000 in Performance Max campaigns, and this drove a 3.38 ROAS. Literally, we spent $1, we made $3.38 back every single time on $192,000. For context, this is a brand that needs to operate at a 2x ROAS to break even. So they were way above break even. They were making money hand over fist in November. Let's dive directly into the Performance Max side of things, because I think that's where you're going to get absolutely the most value. As we look into Performance Max, you'll notice that we're running a lot of Performance Max campaigns. We actually have 7 running here. That's way more than we normally run. However, this is a big account. It's very complex. So reason for this breakdown is all of these products have different average order values. We actually decided to break each of these campaigns by different products. Some products, specifically this top one, drives a much higher average order value, around $170, $185. This second campaign drives some of the lower value products, $100, $75, $80. Again, same here, $70 to $80 range, $80 to $100 range. This campaign here driving about a $200 average order value, another $200. So because we have all these tiers of average order values, it's actually really helpful if we can guide Google and actually tell it, hey, you should spend this much to achieve this much for this specific campaign. One of the worst things you can do is group it all together. You at least need to create listing groups within your Performance Max campaign, but I would also suggest if you're dealing with high budgets, just break them out into unique campaigns, because you should have goals associated to each grouping or cohort of products. Let's dive into one of these campaigns. We are going to go into this Performance Max sales campaign. This campaign I really want to look at because there's a variety of products here. It's the most interesting campaign and it performed the best. We spent $55,000. We drove $241,000 in revenue at a 4.39 ROAS. First thing you're going to notice is when we load up these listing groups, there's going to be a lot of products here, but everything is grouped into this all products section. So what we've done here is this is a catch-all. We have actually decided to not use listing groups in this case, and we've just floated everything into a catch-all. So as we see here, we have a bunch of different groupings based on products, and then we have one catch-all. This catch-all campaign is what's super, super important because we're not going to let demand slip through the cracks. So in this case, we have dozens and dozens of products, actually 465 approved products that ran during the sale period. Now, how we like to make sure things are operating effectively is we will actually go through the product section of our catalog here, and we will look at every single one of these products that we have on the left side here, and we'll compare that across the board. So we want to really understand which products are performing the best, which products are performing the worst. Is there different things that we should do or not do associated to every single product? Should we pull products out of this catalog? Should we add more products into this catalog? And what you find very typically is your best selling products will naturally find their way to the top. They'll have the most demand. They'll drive the best ROAS for you. But there were cases where we actually had to pause down specific products because they stopped working about halfway through the month. It's really important to take a look at your product section and actually understand what's going on here. The next thing we need to understand about every single Performance Performance Max campaign are the most important settings that we ran. A lot of people like to get very fancy with these settings. We like to keep it as simple as possible, but we do have a couple hidden gems in here. So I'm going to walk you through setting by setting what we found to be most effective. First off, for goals, just set your one goal to your purchase event. Don't have multiple goals in here. It's too confusing for Google. We do not like to use this new customer acquisition checkbox. This checkbox basically limits Google to only target specifically acquiring new customers. You might use this in some scenarios, but I'll be honest with you, what we find most of the time is that it limits people from actually repurchasing. We want to show up all the time. We want to show up in the best scenarios when we're most likely to convert. So we do not check this. No value rules. We're using our merchant center feed. We're using all locations without a problem. Here is where it gets a little juicy. There's a whole lot of options. First off, we can go conversions, conversion value, and if you set this up from scratch, you'll have different options available to you as well. But in this case, we are just focusing on conversion value. Now, what we have found across dozens of clients is that setting conversion value first and then clicking set a target ROAS on ad spend and setting this to your break-even point. That's the very first thing you should do. But as you start to scale, so in this case, we knew very easily we were going to be able to hit a 200% ROAS. We set 200% and we just let it go. We'd rather spend a little bit more at a 200% ROAS than try to just be ultra efficient. Location settings, really key here. You're always going to want to just select United States, and then you could either select presence in or interest or presence, doesn't really matter. Automatically created assets. We do keep automatically created assets on for our Performance Max campaigns because it's actually going to allow Google to scrape the site. There are some cases where if you have a big blog or something like that, you might not want to include this. That was the core setup that we used for this Performance Max campaign. And then group together a bunch of your products if you have a big catalog as a catch-all, and then individual products for your best sellers. So if there's one big takeaway, it's that individual campaigns for your best individual products, and then one single catch-all campaign for everything else that's going on in the business. Let's move forward to our search campaigns. One of the most common things that we see on the search side is brands don't like to use branded search. For some reason, a lot of brands have this conception that branded search just doesn't really work effectively, it's not incremental to the business, and that there's no point in it. Now, I'm here to tell you that for the most part, branded search does work. It stops your competitors from bidding on other terms, and it does a whole lot for you. In this case, we ran a boatload of branded search. In the month of November, this business spent nearly $23,000 in branded search to drive $364,000 in revenue. You might say this revenue could have happened without this, but check this out. If you actually go into one of these branded search campaigns and we go to the auction insights, this is going to really debunk how important it is that we are showing up on our branded terms. In this case, we're actually competing with the biggest and the baddest Amazon.com. If we weren't showing up, we're showing up about 88% of their time on branded search, and we're showing up 99% of the time at the top of the page and 98% of the time in the very first result. If we weren't showing up, there's a very good chance that Amazon would show up 99% of the time. If Amazon was showing up every single time instead of us and possibly putting our competitors in front of our own branded search terms, we could have lost over $300,000 in revenue just from Amazon alone and not having a branded search campaign. You could easily imagine how worth it is to spend that $16,000 to return that $300,000, even if half of those people would have not been impacted by the Amazon campaign and naturally would have converted with us anyway. That is still over $150,000 of revenue that we would be risking. And within that branded search campaign, we also like to break things out by product. In this account, we have a variety of different products broken out for branded search, but the most important one is our core branded search ad group. Within this core, we have the brand keywords. Now, I know you can't see them right here, but what we're looking at are your exact brand terms. If your brand name was Apple, this would simply say bracket Apple. Very straightforward, and we want these to be as basic as possible because they're going to be the number one drivers to drive your branded search, because it's most likely what your customers are actually going to put in. In addition to this, we will have a boatload of negative keywords. All of these negative keywords are really to make sure that there's no way that anything in this campaign is not branded search. Then we'd have to be really careful of potentially people typing in apple pie. We'd actually have to put in as a negative that's completely irrelevant to what our brand name is. Adding negative keywords was super important for us in the fourth quarter this year. For video campaigns, we actually just kept this to remarketing. This is the first time I'm actually going to show you a setup of audiences in Google that we're using. For this case, for YouTube, we kept this as straightforward as possible with a 540-day site visitor audience and a retention list. Our retention list is literally everyone who's ever purchased from our website over all time. And our 540-day site visitor is anyone who's been to our site in the last 540 days, which is the maximum allowable time that you could retarget someone using Google Ads. The reason we have these specific two breakouts is because we were not focused on prospecting and getting new customers with YouTube. We were really just focused on getting those customers that understood the brand, that knew about us beforehand, to actually go ahead and then therefore convert. Within each of this single campaign here, we have our two ad groups, and then we have a few ads that are running at the same time. In this case, we just had two ads on the 540-day list and another two ads on the retention list. Very, very straightforward. We did have one clear winner in terms of these ads, one that did tend to work a little bit better, but overall, having the mix of creatives that we're running here, very important. That was just a touch of an overview of what we did, how we set up this client for this sort of month of $4.6 million in revenue in just November alone. If this is interesting, if you have any questions about this, please let me know in the comments below. Really, the most important thing to focus on here is your setup. Every time you're setting up a new campaign, think about its purpose and think about how the algorithm could potentially be impacted by that specific campaign. Product groupings based on average order value or based on their value to you. You always have to follow that up with a catch-all for Performance Max. And then make sure you don't forget about your branded search campaign, especially for you guys out there that have moderate sized brands already. You have to have a branded search campaign. Thank you all so much. See you in the next one.